Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into this week's edition of my top starts and sits for week 11 of this NFL season. Hopefully, you guys know the drill by now that I'm going to give you the top two starts and sits for quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end, as I always do. Starting with the quarterback sit of the week. He was my waiver wire ad of the week, and I think he's a plug and play guy if you need somebody to stream off the waivers this week, and if you have a quarterback on bye. Anyways, with that being said, Russell Wilson against the Ravens. The Ravens have allowed the second most points per game against the quarterback position. In their last four games, the Baltimore defense has allowed all four quarterbacks to throw for over 220 passing yards at minimum. And then what I really like about this matchup is they've given up 11 passing touchdowns in their last four games. And obviously, I gave my stats about Russell. He's thrown for at least 260 yards in two of the three games he started and has 2 out of 3 games he started is thrown for 2 touchdowns. So I'm looking for Russell to get to the 220 mark and 2 touchdowns on Sunday. My other start, CJ Stroud has been kind of going through a sophomore slump. He's been a little bit of a letdown at the fantasy quarterback position, but I think he's going to bounce back this week on Monday night. Going against the Cowboys this week, who have allowed the 4th most fantasy points per game against the quarterback position. I think the biggest boost that he's going to get is he's going to have Nico Collins back in the lineup. His stats with Nico and without Nico are, you can't even compare not how bad he is, just how low his production is without Nico in the lineup. So I think you're going to see what CJ Stroud has done with Collins back on the field. And you look at this Cowboys defense over their last 4 games, they have allowed at least 3 quarterbacks to throw over 220 passing yards, and they've given up 9 passing touchdowns. So I'm looking for that bounce back performance on Monday night where Stroud can get you the yardage and get you at least 2+ touchdowns in week 11. My top sits, maybe this was a given considering how bad the Bears offense has been, but just in case anybody out there thought maybe the new offensive coordinator would give a bump to Caleb, maybe it happens, but I just don't like his matchup this week regardless. Going against this Packers defense, who are tied for the 6th fewest points per game against the quarterback position. Only one quarterback has thrown over 215 passing yards against their defense in their last 4 games. That was Trevor Lawrence. And then they've only allowed 4 passing touchdowns in their last 4 games. So if your quarterback was on a bye, you're maybe thinking, oh, new offensive coordinator for the Bears, we can maybe get Caleb going back to that little 3 or 4 week span he had in this season when he was fantasy relevant. I don't think it's going to happen this week. My other top sit, I am going to go with Geno Smith against the 49ers. The 49ers are allowing the 10th fewest points per game against quarterbacks this year. Now, if you play Geno, maybe he can get you the yardage because over the last 4 games for San Francisco, only 2 quarterbacks have thrown over 200 yards against their defense, and one of them was Geno, and the other quarterback was Dak Prescott. Now, in Geno's career, he's played with the Seahawks, the 49ers 4 times. He's only thrown 2 passing touchdowns in their defense in those 4 games. And then when you look at what San Francisco has allowed in their last 4 games, they've only given up 4 passing touchdowns. So if you're going to place or stream Geno this week, he could possibly get you the yardage like he did in their first matchup this season. But I want to expect the touchdown production, which you might need to have to win your matchup in week 11. Moving into my top starts and sits at the running back position. I think my top start, I think we're going to finally get that classic Nick Chubb game. I love Chubb against the Saints this week. The Saints are tied for the 2nd most allowed points per game against the running back position. They've let 2 lead running backs over the last 4 games to go over 100 rushing yards against their defense. And they've given up 7 running back touchdowns in their last 4 games. So I think this is the game that Chubb's going to have 100 rushing yards, hopefully 2 touchdowns, but I think he finds the end zone at least once for you on Sunday. My other top start, I love Devin Achane against the Raiders. The Raiders have allowed the 7th most points per game against the running back position. In their last 4 games, 3 different running backs have finished with at least 75 rushing yards against their defense. Only given up 5 running back touchdowns in their last 4 games, but they've been giving up a lot of the yardage. I think Devin Achane's due for a touchdown score as well. So I'm looking for him to get 80 to 100 total yards and a touchdown or 2 in week 11. My top sits, James Cook against Chiefs. Now, I say this all the time, guys. Sometimes the seasonal leagues, I get it. Like James Cook, like I'm probably going to leave him in my flex. I'm just going to temper my expectations that he's probably going to have a floor outcome. But when you put your daily lineups together, he's a name I would look to avoid. And then if you do like prop bets over unders, maybe you want to bet the under on James Cook. Going against this Chiefs defense, who have allowed the fewest points per game against running backs this season, in their last 4 games, the most rushing yards a single running back finished with was 58 rushing yards, and that was Jordan Mason. And they've only given up 1 running back touchdown in their last 4 games, so it's going to be tough for him to crack the end zone, and I just don't know if he's going to be a viable option for you. Again, though, in seasonal leagues, I would get it if you play him. There's 4 teams on a bye week. Just temper your expectations if you put them in your lineup. Same thing goes for my other top sit. I would understand if you want to bet on him and bet on the volume of touches that he's gotten over the last 4 games. But Chase Brown against the Chargers. The Chargers have allowed the second fewest points per game against running backs this season. Now, only 1 running back has finished over 70 rushing yards against the Chargers defense in their last 4 games. That was James Conner a few weeks ago. And then the other thing, too, though, why I don't like him is they have not allowed a running back to score a touchdown in their last 4 games. They're one of the best defenses in the league. So, sure, you might want to bet on his volume, especially with the bye weeks. Just like I said about James Cook. Seasonal leagues, temper your expectations. He might have a floor outcome in Week 11. Daily lineups, that's a name I'm looking to avoid this week. And if I'm betting over or unders, I'm probably going to lean towards the under on Chase Brown in Week 11. Moving into my top starts and sits for the wide receiver position. My top start of the week, feeding off my top start of Russell Wilson, George Pickens against the Ravens defense. The Ravens have allowed the most points per game against wide receivers this season. And I'm betting on him getting the yardage in this game because they've allowed 5 different wide receivers to finish with at least 75 receiving yards in their last 4 games. They've also given up 6 wide receiver touchdowns in their last 4 games. But like I mentioned with Russell Wilson, they've actually given up 11 passing touchdowns. Those other 5 have either gone to running backs or tight ends. But I would look for George to have a 100-yard performance, and hopefully he finds the end zone for you as well. And then my other top start, I like Deebo Samuel and the rookie Ricky Pearsall against the Seahawks. The Seahawks have allowed the 8th most points per game against wide receivers this year. In the first game this season, Deebo had 117 total yards and a touchdown, so he had previous production against that defense already this season. I'll look for him to continue that on Sunday. And then when we look at what Seattle's allowed in their last 4 games, they have allowed 4 different wide receivers to finish with at least 90 receiving yards. Only given up 5 wide receiver touchdowns, but they've been giving up a lot of yards, so I think that's where you can get the production for Pearsall and Samuel, and hopefully they can find the end zone as well. Moving into my sits, I just got it listed there because there's so many players you can play from the wide receiver corps in Green Bay, but any of the Packers wide receivers against the Bears have allowed the second fewest points per game against the wide receiver position, and it's kind of been a crapshoot as far as which Bears wide receiver to play any week. I think Jayden Reed's always your safest bet because he's going to get the targets and can kind of be a PPR machine. But if you do want to bet on one of the Packers wide receivers, just understand they have not been giving up a lot of yards against the wide receivers over their last 4 games. Only 1 wide receiver finished over 75 receiving yards against their defense, and that was Terry McLaurin. And then they've only given up 4 wide receiver touchdowns, so I do feel like if you play a Packers wide receiver, I would understand it. 4 teams on a bye, you might be forced to play like a Jayden Reed. Just temper your expectations. It might be a floor outcome, and you're just going to have to hope they find the end zone for you on Sunday. My other top sit, I'm going to go with Jordan Addison against the Titans. Tennessee's defense is tied for the 3rd fewest points per game allowed against wide receivers this season. Now, in their last 4 games, only 1 wide receiver went over 70 receiving yards against them, and that was Keon Coleman. If there's going to be a wide receiver that finishes over 70 receiving yards against their defense, it's probably going to be Justin Jefferson, obviously. And then just like that Bears defense, they've only given up 4 wide receiver touchdowns, so it does feel like it's a touchdown or bust opportunity if you wanted to put Addison in your lineups this week. Moving into the tight end position. My top start of the week, he's a good streaming option. Maybe people have picked him up at this point because of how productive he's been in the last 4 weeks for the Miami offense. But Jonnu Smith against the Raiders. The Raiders have allowed the fourth most points per game against tight ends this season. In their last 4 games, 3 different tight ends have finished with at least 70 receiving yards, and they have given up 4 tight end touchdowns in their last 4 games. So I think Smith's going to get 50 receiving yards and hopefully get you in the end zone if you decide to stream him in your lineups this Sunday. My other top start, I'm going to go with Sam Laporta against the Jaguars. The Jaguars have allowed the 6th most points per game against tight ends this season. Just like the Raiders, they have also allowed 3 different tight ends to finish with at least 70 receiving yards in their last 4 games. Now, they've only given up 1 tight end touchdown, but again, they're giving up a lot of yardage, and sometimes all you can hope for your tight ends is to get you at least 50 receiving yards. That's a good quality week at this point from the tight end position, so I like the chances that Sam Laporta can do that on Sunday. Moving into the sits, my top sit of the week, actually in that matchup, Evan Ingram against the Lions. The Lions are actually tied for the 2nd fewest allowed points per game against the tight end position. Now, in their last 4 games, only 1 tight end finished over 35 receiving yards. That was Dalton Schultz this past week. But why I really don't like him is they have not allowed a tight end to score a touchdown in their last 4 games. So if you decide you want to play Ingram, I would understand it, but you're just going to have to bet that he gets you 40 plus yards because he might not be able to find the end zone because they've been very good at keeping tight ends out of the end zone over their last 4 games. My other top sit might be controversial, but he's going to be like in seasonal leagues, he's going to be a temper your expectations play. In daily lineups, I'll look to avoid him this week, but it's going to be Brock Bowers against the Dolphins. Now, before I enter this, talk about the matchup, another thing that I think I factored into this is Michael Mayer, their other tight end, is going to return this week. So he's going to be in the lineup, taking away. They shouldn't take away a lot of snaps, but he's probably going to take away some snaps and targets away from Brock Bowers. Then when you look at this matchup, Miami has allowed the 4th fewest points per game against tight ends this season. In their last 4 games, only 1 tight end has finished over 35 receiving yards. That was Trey McBride. So you would ideally think that Brock Bowers could do that. But again, Michael Mayer is going to be in the lineup. So does that take away some targets from Bowers on Sunday? And they've only given up 1 tight end touchdown. So again, seasonal leagues, I get it at this point. You got to leave Brock Bowers in your lineup. I would just temper your expectations. He's probably going to have a floor outcome. But in daily leagues, I would look to avoid him, put him in my daily lineups this weekend. So yeah, those are my top starts and sits for week 11 of this NFL season. We got 4 games until the playoffs, guys, so it's time to stack those wins and lock up a playoff spot in all your leagues. Maybe get you some points. I play in some leagues where you can win money every week if you can be a high scorer, so at least do that if you're going to miss the playoffs. But yeah, with that being said, if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed or followed me on all my social media platforms, please do. Want to see those follower counts and subscriber counts go up? I'm on X, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. And as always, guys, enjoy your morning, your night, your day, your night, whatever, your weekend, whenever you're watching this. I'll talk to you next week. Peace out.